Good morning. You're listening to the Blaine's World show, heard each Wednesday at 9 a.m. here on WPVM LP in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my lovely downtown Fairview Zoom studio. And I'm here with a friend of mine, Sean O'Connor. And Sean, you can wave to all your fans in Facebook world. If anybody's watching. Okay,
How you
great.
doing?
And each week, Sean, what we do, we focus on two things. We focus either on the Asheville theater scene or the theater scene in general, and also some of the really cool things that are happening in Asheville. And so toward that end, I will give now a kind of a formal introduction of Sean. And Sean, I should mention, is a member of New York City's Great Circle Rep Theater, is a playwright, a screenwriter, an actor, and a director in theater, film, plus some TV. He has published 10 plays, most of which have won National Best New Play Awards, and his work has been produced many times all across the US and as far as Dublin, Ireland. Two of his plays have been translated into French and published in France to be produced by the Baz Arts Theater in Metz. Sean has really recently directed and acted in a film he wrote entitled Summer of 70. And Sean, the question I always ask, first time I speak to somebody on the air, is how did you get into this whole acting theater gig? How old were you?
It's a great question. I didn't get into it in high school. I was, although my French family, I'm half French, lots of actors and filmmakers. But what happened was I was in college and I wrote a one-act play. And it was about a girlfriend, a breakup, I was 19 years old. Those were the big challenges in my life. But people responded to the play. And then people said, hey, you want to act in a play? And I said, yeah. And I was terrified. But I acted in a play, then I got another part. And then I did summer stock. And then I came back to Columbia and just did all the plays. It was, Tony Kushner and I were running the theater back then. And we were doing Strindberg, Ibsen, Miller, Werner Fassbinder. I mean, it was pretty wild stuff in New York, but it was an amazing education. I was also a writer. And
before you wrote the first play, had you done writing beforehand?
Yeah, that was the first thing I did. When I was a kid, I would write these wild little imaginative stories and I would read them to my family. And they were kind of funny and I guess somewhat creative. And I would hang them up in my room next to the picture of Joe Namath above the Hardy Boys. And then what happens in high school, I was beginning to read a lot. I was just basically playing sports in high school and being obsessed with girls. That seems to happen a lot. But I took a poetry class and it just, the profound expression that I experienced writing poems really ignited me. So that was always there. I wrote the play after that. I was acting for years, but even in New York, when I was acting very successfully, I kept coming home and writing short stories and plays. Short stories and poems. And I remember I was working on soap operas for a few years, and I would hang in those soap operas, and I would read Marcel Proust, and I'd read Tolstoy, because those guys were just like Sam Shepard was huge for me. Those guys were just so stimulating for me. And then I started thinking in terms of plays, and I could go on and on. You want me to keep going?
Well, no, just go back to what you said. So the first play you wrote, kind of a walk, you just did a 10-minute or whatever it was. So was that play ever produced or done anywhere?
You're talking about the one-act play?
You mentioned the very first thing you wrote as a play. That was the one-act play, right?
Yes, that was only done as a stage reading in college. And then I transferred into the actor, and I was acting with everybody at Columbia and Summer Stock Theater. What happened was, in terms of really writing plays, it's a pretty interesting story. I went to see a film, a Cassavetes film called Streams. And there was he played a father there. and he didn't know how to be a father. He was with his 14-year-old daughter that he hadn't seen in 13 years. So he's trying to like make up for all that lost fatherhood. He's telling her, well, you should eat vegetables and don't stay out late. And it was so awkward and so crazy. I left the theater. On the bus home, I was about 29. This guy came into my head and started speaking. I didn't know what was going on. I got home, I picked up a pen. I knew I had to start writing this. And the guy just kept speaking. And then I realized he was in a seedy hotel room in Las Vegas with his ex-wife he hadn't seen for 16 years. And he was about to see the boy he left behind 16 years ago. And the play was called There's an Angel in Las Vegas. And I wrote it. It just kind of like, it was one of those experiences you don't really think about much or control. It had its own mechanism of expression, and it just went, sent it out a few places. I didn't know anything, and it won a big national award. And it was done several times in the East Coast, New York, DC, up in Massachusetts, and it's published. And I got so hooked to playwriting. I fell in love.
But back to something you said earlier, and I want to share a crazy idea with you. But I want to talk about the very first play you wrote, that as a 19-year-old, or
Yeah.
that play. So I'm asking for a reason. Was that ever done or produced anywhere? Did anybody ever do it?
Nobody did it. People read it, but nobody did it. I wish they had,
But here's the idea, Sean. I want you to keep this in mind next time you speak to Bill Gregg, a mutual friend of ours. But I have this great idea for a fundraiser. I've had it for a long time. And I want everybody to do their first work, So a lot of times it might be a kid was a tree as a 5-year-old, and he would get on stage. Because I asked you, there was no record of this. Wouldn't that be cool if we actually did the play and you had a record of it? So
I would love to. I probably have someplace. I would love to.
But I want to do that. And I just thought, I'll ask you the same thing too. What was your first acting gig?
First acting gig. One thing is, in high school, my best friend was the actor. He was the musical actor, handsome dude. Andy Porras was his name, and he could sing, he could dance, and he could act. And I used to just like peer over his shoulder. It's like, what's this acting thing? So my first acting gig was after writing the one-act play. They gave me two roles in some weird plays, and I can't even remember them. Kind of like 16th century French, whatever room plays. And then what I did is I hitchhiked around the country. I took a year off, hitchhiked around the country in Europe, and then I got a job in Summerstock. And here I am, I'm like 20, I don't know how to act. And I'm playing Biff in Death of a Salesman. I'm doing The Odd Couple. I mean, it was like this tremendous experience. So that was the initiation.
Where was that?
That was Fort Salem Summer Theater.
Okay. I don't know. Where? Okay, but that's cool. So you started in acting, and then kind of took you a lot of different places. And let me ask you a question, because you certainly have what I would call an eclectic background. Out of all the things and that's the term I use, someday I'll tell you a story about that term. But in all the things you've done, acting, directing, writing, teaching, I assume you've done just about a lot of different stuff. Do you have a favorite thing?
That's a great question. I will say writing. And I will be very strong about that. But I had always, I was raised with the Four Seasons and the Beatles. And I wanted to be, and I turned to my dad. I was 7 years old and said, Dad, I want to learn how to play piano. And he said, the O'Connors don't play piano. The O'Connors are tough. So we had to play sports. I would have learned the piano. Anyhow, in the last...
Did you ever learn the piano?
A little bit, yes. When I was
Okay.
27. Last couple of years, I taught myself guitar, and I've written like an album's worth of songs. And, it's that typical boomer thing, we all still want to be the Beatles. So this is my desire or attempt to kind of achieve that. But I really am enjoying it because I love great pop music, great soul, great country, great Motown.
Sean, I want you to keep that in mind. I'm going to offer you a challenge. I'm very serious about this. You know where I'm going on this. I'll have
Yes,
you
I
on
do.
another show if you want. I've had several musicians where we do a kind of a mini concert. Have you ever performed your music?
I've only right now, because it's just been about 2 years where I started teaching, and last year where I'm writing. I've performed it for my wife and for one friend. Yeah, I haven't played Madison Square Garden yet, by the way.
Forgetting Madison Square Garden, it's an offer to you if you want to take advantage of it. You tell me when to perform in Blaine's World.
I will do it.
Okay, I'm very serious. We can do a show just like we're doing now. The only thing is you'd be performing instead. But what a great opportunity! And again, we talked before about your first play. This could be your first record of you performing.
No, listen, it would be extraordinary for me. I really appreciate it, Blaine. Let me get these songs down.
Okay,
The whole chord thing is still throwing me off, but
whenever you're ready. But the invitation is there. It'd be such an honor to have you at your first performing gig on Blaine's World. So love to do that. You tell me when.
it would be
Okay.
so much fun.
So let's talk then a little bit about the process, because I'm fascinated by writers in general, and particularly playwrights. In
Mhm.
terms of writing, are you a kind of guy, or tell me about your process? Do you write every day? Do you sit down for 2 hours and create, or how do you do the writing?
Basically, that I tell young people, when I lecture and stuff, I say you have to step your foot into the river every day, that river of creativity, because if you ignore it a few days in a row, you lose the juice, the wetness. You've always got to keep yourself wet. I do it every day, and I have lots of thoughts about what I'm going to write. I think about before I go to sleep, which is also very interesting. Sleep seems to calibrate everything and solves problems, dramatic problems, gives characters avenues to go down that weren't there before you went to sleep. So that is what I do. I will usually write for longer than 2 hours. It's usually about 4 hours.
Is there a set time you write?
You know, I'm getting up there in years, Blaine. I'm 605.
Okay. Look a day older than 604.
Thank you. It's new facial cream, but thank you.
Okay.
My energy is in the morning. Coffee ignites that, and that's when I'm cooking. But I can always go back, a little more coffee late in the day and write again, sometimes at night. And I love it. I write about a lot of different things, but I love it.
I was going to ask you, in terms of when you're writing, are you writing different things at different times, or do you write one thing at a time and finish it, go on to the next?
I try to do that, the second one, but that's not always the case professionally. You might get a gig. I've worked in film in Hollywood on and off for years where boom, you might be in the middle of a play, but they offer you this gig where you make nice money. So you're bouncing back and forth. You learn to do that, but it's best to stay with a one focused narrative with one set of characters who are the people you're hanging out with for like a year. Stay with that. That's the best way.
How do you get your ideas for your plays?
Another great question, man. When I was young, they kind of just came to me, and they didn't. I was like, there's an angel in Las Vegas, and then kidnapped, and they were like these fantasy, wild, poetic myths. They were very funny too. And I would think, why did this come to me? And then when I saw it later on, I realized that they were really essentially disguised versions of something I had gone through. Very disguised. Then what happened was, I'd been out in LA. I'd never written about my life that intensely. I was out in LA writing for a film, and then I was supposed to get another job. I didn't get the job. All of a sudden, I'm there with no job. And I just said, man, I got to get out. Came back to New York to my wife, Pam, and my girls, Sophie and Juliet. And I said, I want to write poetry. That was the first thing I ever did. And I had read Ted Hughes's book, The Birthday Letters, about his marriage with Sylvia Plath. And I loved the way he used poetry to examine, or as a scalpel, to surgically examine his relationship with Sylvia. Some of it I believed entirely, some of it I did not, but that's life. So I thought to myself, I can write poetry. What's my trauma? And then a bell went off. Bing! Dad. So I spent one winter writing 100 poems to my father, who had died a few years before.
Did you publish them?
I published the play. In fact, that's a great question, because I'm now working to publish the book of poetry. I published the play. What happened was I wrote the poems, and all over New York, me and a rock and roller I'd do the poems, and then he'd sing songs. Sometimes I'd sing songs with him. We had a whole thing going out. And then I got these theaters that said, come on, let's turn this into a play. The poems stand by themselves. You know, they might even be better than the play, but the play's damn good. So we turned it into a play, won awards, a lot of productions got published. But that was the first time I addressed my life. And ever since then, what I write about, the summer of 70, the film that I just directed, in the summer of 70, me and my Jersey boys were sleeping under the boardwalk in Lavallette, New Jersey for the whole summer.
Was it the summer of 70?
Summer of 70.
Okay.
We were up to no good, but it was fun.
Because that was kind of, I'm trying to think, that was my era too, you know, so right around summer of 70, I'm surprised I didn't see you there. But that was, so that became, talk about that. So that was I want to talk to you about, that was a movie then, or you wrote it as a movie, or you wrote it as a play, or what'd you do?
You got it. I wrote it as a full length. And when I was out in LA, and the full length won this huge award there, the biggest of the year. And so they called me up to come on back, you know, we're going to get this made. Ryan Gosling, Cruise, you know, all the names. And of course, no Ryan Gosling, no Cruise. I went back to New York. I knew how good the script was. And then I was down at the Jersey Shore about 3 years ago, and friends of mine who had been in my films and plays of mine, Jeff Farkash and Dennis Ostermeyer, stormed on my house. And we stayed up until 4 a.m. drinking whiskey and singing the Stones as loud as possible. But they convinced me, you got to make that film. And the first way you do it is to make the short film. Then you do what I'm doing now, festivals, and get interest and money and then I'll do the feature.
So is that what you did? So you already have, you have the short film, right?
Short film is being finished up right now. It'll be sent out to festivals come September, and we are working then to make the feature. I think it's going to be a fabulous feature.
How long is the short film?
15 minutes.
Okay. Just keep in mind, when, if you're ready, I'll send you another invite that love to, we could also preview, you know, through screen sharing, we could preview it on the show as well, you know, if you'd ever want to. You know, we could talk about it, show the film, talk about it some more if you want.
Blaine, you're being very kind.
No, it sounds like it'd be a fun thing to do. You know, the I showed a film the other day. Somebody wrote a short film, but I'd love to show that, you know, the 15-minute version. And so eventually the goal is to have a full length. What's the difference, or do you prefer writing then a script for a film or a screenplay? Not a screenplay or a play. Is there a difference?
There's a big difference. Screenplays, if you want to get it made in America, there are these laws, there are these rules of dramatic creation and structure. Page 18, this happens. Page 10, this already happens. Page 26, this happens. That's the inciting incident that barrels up and forces the protagonist and the antagonist to confront in the climax and somebody wants. It's all Aristotle. It's everything that Aristotle created a long time ago. Plays, though, you can just grab a piece of your life, grab a piece of your heart, because you can explore everything on that stage and you can leave nothing unturned. So you can take your life, keep a narrative. Everybody has to have a narrative, but have great characters, funny characters, dealing with really an intense point in their lives, which might actually change them forever. And you follow a narrative, beginning, middle, end. You're not imprisoned like you are in Hollywood. And also, plays still have poetry. The great playwrights, Miller, O'Neill, Williams, Shepard, Lanford Wilson, who was my mentor in New York at Circle Rep. He was a wonderful friend and very encouraging to me. These guys, and they knew that I had it too. I knew Shepard too. These guys had poetry. And if you can bring that onto stage, stage rises. It's up in the air. You know?
One of the cool things listening to you, Sean, is the fact that, again, you have this background that sort of goes into lots of different areas. And the question I want to ask, and listeners I think might be interested in this as well, is how do you pick up these different skills? In other words, all of a sudden you start writing poetry. Did you study poetry, or did you read about it? Did you speak to poets, or you just started writing it? How do you pick up your various skills?
That's a great question, man. I think what it is I think you got something burning in you. It's there. It's there, and you're reading stuff, say if it's poetry, and you're thinking, I might be able to do that, I might be able to do that. And then I tried it. And then I remember at that time, I was 18, I was in London with my friend Jeff Thomas, who was a professor. And I was reading all this poetry and stuff, but I was also a little American rock and roll kid, And he had Bob Dylan's album, Freewheeling. Do you know that, Blaine?
I know a lot of Dylan. Go ahead. Yeah.
It's extraordinary. And he was 21.
Right, exactly.
So I wake up in the morning, I was 18 years old, never heard that album, and I would listen to it. And man, he was doing something with words that was making me think about so many things and was going way inside my soul. I came back to America, started reading Dylan Thomas and getting more into Bob Dylan's oeuvre. And exactly the same time that I came back into America, there was somebody else who had just emerged, who had a real poetic facility, a rock and roller. He was like 21, and strangely enough, he came from the Jersey Shore.
Okay, yeah.
And they called him Bruce Springsteen. But Bruce, those first two albums, it was street poetry, man. And he was really doing it. Dylan noticed it too. So I had the rock and roll guys. Lennon was a big one for me, Joni Mitchell. And then I was just reading every poet in the world and just pouring it out. And, these things were kind of life-changing experiences. I was a pretty anxiety-ridden kid.
Well, it's so funny because you were like ahead of time. Because was it Dylan? When was it? He won the Nobel or the Pizza? What did he win the Pulitzer?
He won the Nobel.
Who would have thunk? But ahead of his time. As a poet, right? He didn't as a musician. So when do you write? Then I'm amazed that you get all the stuff done that you do. I guess you don't sleep much.
I haven't slept since 1950.
Because like in the middle of everything, it seems like you'll be writing a poem too, where somehow you'll just start writing a poem.
That definitely happens. I mean, my days these days are I wake up and I'm writing a novel called American Roulette. That's having a good time.
Is that the first time you've written a novel?
First time I've written a novel, yeah.
Very exciting.
So I go through that. Then I do some editing work on the side for a company in Houston. And then I come back and I work on my movie. I'm editing the movie. And at night, I pop open a bottle of wine, which I will do just after I say I bid adieu to you. And I play guitar. I play bad guitar on my porch, but I love it.
Well, I told you we're gonna get to you on that one. But also one other thing you do that kind of makes you stand out in my mind is that you're one of the few directors I know who, and playwrights also, who also are in their own stuff. In other words, I think you've told me you'll direct a play and then you'll be in it as well, or you'll.
Yes.
And that's kind of unusual because most people tell me they don't do that. You enjoy that?
It's funny. Most people tell you they don't do that
Right.
because it is terrifying. But the first time I did it was a play called Kidnapped down on Theater Row, Workshop Theater, great theater. And I was directed and I wrote it. I knew the play was good. It was real funny, but I was acting in it on stage. So here I am. It's all me. And then I'm on stage, and during the big laugh moments, nobody's laughing. I go off stage. During the big laugh moments, nobody's laughing. That's a night. That happens in theater. If you're not strong and focused, it'll unrattle you. The first night I did it, it unrattled me. The second night I did it, everybody was exploding with laughter. After that, it was just a joy. It's all a joy.
Okay. I guess that's the key. You have to enjoy it. And it segues into, I guess, maybe a final series of questions having to do with over the last year. And let me ask you personally, how much did you miss not being able to do or see theater?
It was very heavy because I had in February, right before
Right.
COVID hit here, I had directed a play of mine, Broken Birds, up in Pelham, New York, which we didn't know it, but it was the hot seat of COVID in the country. And it ended in February, big success. And then I won this award, the SETC New England Theater Award for Best New Play for my play, Miss Hollywood. Went up there, saw some old friends. We had a great time. They performed it. Came back to New York, ready, because 2 more of my plays were about to be produced. I was going to direct one. Boom, COVID, like March 9th.
Right, exactly.
COVID came in one day, and that was it. And it's been tough. And there were, Blaine, there were moments where I thought, am I going to have to give up playwriting? Is it not?
Can you imagine? Yeah.
No. As you know, your work is your soul. You get so attached to it. And you do it long enough, you become it. And this is the thing that for whatever reason I became. But it's so now there's these 2 theater companies that contacted me last week. The Future Stars out in Wisconsin, a young group of really interesting actors. They're going to do World of Sinatra's. And then up in Saugerties, New York, there's a theater called Around the Bend. And my friend Sidney Grossberg Ranga, who actually directed a production of World of Sinatra's in New York City a couple of years ago. Beautiful production. She's got kidnapped up there, so she's going to begin working on it. So it's coming back, and it's really been a pleasant experience.
Has any of your stuff over this last year been done via Zoom?
I stayed away. I felt if I got in there, I wouldn't get out. And I stayed away just because I had these other productions that were going to be done. And Blaine, I know the stage. I know that black box. I know my buddies, women, and my actors who I'm with in that black box, that stage. That's where we always created life together. So the Zoom thing, I've seen some good Zoom stuff. The
Exactly.
Irish Rep Theater is doing some great stuff.
Well, where I've liked it, Sean, is when they've actually done the show and just shown a tape version of the show as opposed to, 18 square people in squares. To me, it's not the same thing too, but it's exciting. And I guess this last question, how's it for you when you go elsewhere and see somebody else's production of one of your plays, that you didn't even direct, you didn't star in, you just kind of sit back in an audience? That must be a thrill, isn't it?
That's a great question. Do our mutual friends like Bill Gregg or
Yeah.
Doc Madison listen to your show?
Bill may occasionally, or Liz, whatever, but go ahead with the thought. And we'll give a shout out. I'll tell them to watch it. What are you going to say?
Bill Gregg, Doc Madison, Michael Madison, Randy Nugent, these guys,
Right. Yeah, sure.
These are guys who have been in my plays and guys I've become friends with because they're great, talented guys. And all I know with them is when I first came down here for this play, New Truck for Paulie in the 90s, I didn't know what to expect. Man, Bill directed it. Randy was in it. There's these two other guys, Joe Edlin, Tim something, or Edlin, and his wife at the time. I hate that I can't remember his name. He was like Malkovich. The wife was fabulous. The kid who played the son didn't have much experience. He was a raw actor. Randy's a great actor.
Right.
Bill did. They did a production. The reviewers said it too. That just blew the house away.
And that's why now I know why I didn't see it, because that was before my time. I didn't come down until about 2008. Last question as we wind down, Sean, if folks want to find out more about Sean O'Connor, plays, stuff you're doing, what's the best bet?
The best bet is my website. Should I give that?
Please, yeah.
Which is writersean.com. WRITERSEAN.com. I can also give this kind of second email of mine.
Okay, feel free. Shoot.
Okay. I have this side email I check like once a week. McCoke, M like Michael, COAK @AOL.com.
Okay, I know, Sean, you're also on Facebook. If people want to find you there, I guess they can find you. And I'd like to thank you for being my guest this first half hour on the Blaines World Show. This is a real pleasure. And hopefully, if you're out in Asheville, North Carolina, or I'm in the Jersey Shore, we'll sometime bump into each other again. Speak to you soon.
Please get in touch with me, and I will definitely come down and perform for a couple of the shows. And Blaine, this has been a delight, so thank you.
Well, thanks very much. Speak to you soon, Sean. Be well.
Okay,
okay, as Sean disappears, we're going to try to find our second guest today. And as he works his way into the studio, there he is. Hi, Scott. I'll just mention to our listeners that WPVM's mission is to foster community through programming that cultivates dialogue to inform and entertain. The station provides the medium for artists, businesses, community leaders, and nonprofits to share their voice on live radio. Listeners are invited to help support WPVM's efforts by making a tax-deductible contribution. You can do so by going to the website, WPVMFM.org, and looking at the donate option on the upper right-hand side. My second guest today is Scott Woody. And welcome aboard, Scott. He is the owner of ISIS Music Hall. You can feel free to wave to all your fans and friends in Facebook world, if anybody's watching. And Scott has, I think, a really fascinating background. He was born and raised in North Carolina. He's been married 40 years with 3 children and 1 granddaughter. He attended, now this is just blew me away when I found out about you, Scott. You attended North Carolina State, a degree in zoology, and attended the College of Veterinary Medicine at University of Georgia, then started a veterinary practice in Midtown Atlanta in 1980. And he's since, as somebody retired from that, sold what became a large practice in 2008, moved to Asheville 2010, right about when we did, traveled to Atlanta to work for the new owner for several years, and retired in 2012 when they opened the ISIS Restaurant and Music Hall. He's also a banjo player, played a number of bands along the way, and also enjoys woodworking and wood art. And the question I have, Scott, that's some background. I'll take the first thing, I guess, the veterinary work. As a kid, you grew up in North Carolina, right? You said.
That's correct. In Gastonia, North Carolina.
Okay. Did you always know you wanted to be a veterinarian?
No, I actually, I was very fascinated with animals, let's put it that way. And when I was at North Carolina State, I was in wildlife biology, but I took zoology pre-med, pre-dent. And I got into a comparative anatomy class there and actually discovered pre-veterinary medicine. And it's interesting because it's kind of natural for me to have done that. So I was very pretty much smitten with that whole thing, but I hadn't thought about it prior to that. I was more in wildlife biology, but um, the anatomy and all of that really kind of grabbed me. And
When you were a kid, did you have lots of animals, or did the family have lots of animals?
we had animals, and I used to go out and fish and do all of those things. And I mean, I was pretty. I remember one time that I would capture snakes. So I got I captured a copperhead one time and had it in the bird cage. Apparently, it was just out of hibernation. So I took that around the neighborhood, and my mom, of course, got calls from everybody. Well, when I got home with it, she was waiting for me. And I hate to say this because I would never kill a snake, but she took a hoe to the snake and had dinner. Well, afterwards, I went out and dissected the snake, and as a child, so
How old were you about, do you think?
I was probably about 9.
That's
8 or
fascinating, because that maybe kind of put something in the back of your mind that this would be kind of an interesting thing to do.
Well, I was pretty intrigued with the anatomy and all that I found on that. So I guess it was there. I just didn't know it, which I guess a lot of people are like that. They don't know what they have deep inside themselves until the opportunity comes along to bring it out.
So then you studied this in college, and you became a veterinarian, and you were a veterinarian in, where were you a veterinarian?
I had a practice in Atlanta, Georgia.
Atlanta. And so you started the practice, built it up. How did you enjoy that?
I did enjoy it. I had 30 years of that. It's a great career. I loved it. I guess I had the philosophy because of all the other things that I enjoyed doing it, whether it was music or wood art or, photography, that I didn't want to necessarily do only one thing in my lifetime. So um, I had a good run at that. I enjoyed it. But I didn't want that to be the last thing I did before I died, I guess. So anyway.
What's so, I guess, coincidental though, is Woody. Is that your real last name?
Yes.
Because it's so funny. You told me you're into woodworking and working with wood, and what a perfect name for you to do that. Had you always been doing that as well, or you started that later in life?
No, I started that a little bit later in life. Interestingly enough, I had a client who came in and he told me about his brother that turned wood. So that's really interesting. I've always kind of been interested in that, and I went and visited them. And again, that's one of those things. Turning wood or working with wood, you can see various things. I don't turn wood anymore. I turned some, but I went to making things like butterflies and flowers out of book matching spalted wood is what I do. I don't have any samples of that here, but I enjoy doing it. And I make things that are book matched essentially with old spalted wood.
So you still do that, right? That's kind
I'm
of.
doing that now, yes.
And then in addition to that, when did you start playing the banjo?
I started playing the guitar in about the 5th grade and had a little electric band at that time. And in the 6th grade, which was very popular because we were the only ones that had a band, and the girls.
Very cool, right?
I kind of gave it up in high school, and then when I got to veterinary college, interestingly enough, one of my classmates played the banjo, and despite the fact that I was from North Carolina, where the banjo is king, I listened to that banjo, and I was again smitten by the sound of it. So I started playing banjo when I was in veterinary school.
And
basically I studied, and then I played banjo, and then I studied, and that was about my life for about 4 years.
as when you're in school, did you perform anywhere, or were you in any groups that performed?
I did. I actually was in a group with the two guys that were in my class, the one that played the banjo, and then there was a bass player. I took up the guitar again because I wasn't accomplished enough on the banjo to play it at that time. I was practicing banjo, but playing guitar in the group. So we had a little band that we played, whether they wanted us to or not.
Well, now, when you picked up the banjo, was this all self-taught or did you study with anybody?
It was self-taught. I mean, you know, banjo is one of those things where you kind of grab licks and things from other players. You know, back when I was learning, you had to slow down an LP to listen. Now you've
Right.
got all the digital stuff, which makes it, you know, a lot easier to do. But no, it was pretty much self-taught, and I play a melodic style banjo and Scruggs style. If anybody out there knows, you know, much about the banjo.
I'm going to share an idea with you, Scott, that I'd like you to keep in mind. And and we could do this at ISIS Music Hall, but what we should do is get your 5th grade group together again, if they're still around. I'm serious about this. I always thought this, I'm serious about this. Everybody would do the very first thing they ever did. You know what I mean? So can you imagine, you know, because they didn't videotape it then, I assume they didn't have videotape then. Wouldn't that be a fun thing to do? Not just you, but all your performers at ISIS Music Hall come to a fundraiser, I'm telling you, and just do their first performance that was never taped. Wouldn't that be fun?
That might be interesting. I probably have to see if they're all still alive.
Exactly. Keep in touch with them. But I thought that'd be a fun to everybody recreate their first performance. Or in your case, for getting 5th grade, you said in veterinary school, you had a little group that played with a couple of your buddies. Are they still around?
They are still around.
Invite them to ISIS Music Hall, and we're going to do a reunion. Wouldn't that be a fun thing?
I just have all the bands I've ever played in come.
Well, exactly. That'd be excepting it'd be a whole week show, right? Or have you played in a lot of bands?
Well, I had 3 bands in Atlanta, each one of them about 5 years or so. And the last one would have gone on longer, except that I moved to Asheville. Yeah, so I had about 3 bands down there over about a 20-year period.
How cool was that? So you were during the day, or during the day, your regular gig was a veterinarian, and you had a band you played as well.
Yes,
Are
we
you
do.
doing-
We do about 50 gigs a year.
Wow. Are you doing any? Are you in a band now?
No, I'm not in a band. I was in a band when I came up here, and then once ISIS opened up, I kind of set the banjo down for probably about 5 years, and then in the last 2 years, I picked it back up. More so this past year, because
Well, sure.
you know it was easy to pick up because it was the only thing to do.
Now let's
So
talk about ISIS, because it's kind of an interesting operation, and also, I guess your being in this area is almost the same time I came in board. You came in around 2010, was it? You moved to Asheville?
well, we officially moved up here then.
Right.
We were traveling up here. We were planning. I had like a 10-year exit strategy out of
Okay.
and so we were coming up there. And we actually purchased the ISIS Theater building that was built in 1937. We purchased that over 20 years ago. And we just kind of had it as an investment up here, because when we came up here, we went through West Asheville and we really loved the situation up here, and they had these historic buildings. Well, where we came from in Atlanta, we were in Midtown, and we went down into Midtown when it had been basically abandoned. So they had all of these beautiful homes down there that had been broken up into boarding homes or crack houses or whatever. And so we kind of saw the same vision for West Asheville as what happened in Midtown and Virginia Highlands in Atlanta. So we ended up investing in a couple of properties up here, and the ISIS Theater was one of those properties. At that time, it had a small Italian restaurant in it called Possibilities at the time.
Oh, what I knew that. I knew the restaurant well too. I really liked it too.
Yeah, they were there for about 10 years. It didn't do very well.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But so once we had gotten our situation in Atlanta taken care of, and we're spending more time in Asheville, we decided to renovate the building. And originally we tried to find some chefs that might want a second operation in Asheville, but no one was interested in the music that we could find. So we kind of sat down and decided to do it as a family.
Which is quite a story into itself. So when did that decision come? When did you make that decision?
That was in about 2010. We started the renovation on the ISIS in 2011. We had to stop and get some redrawings done because it was a lot more massive of a project than we had originally thought. And my son and I gutted the place, and then we had a home contractor that worked with me on renovating it. And that renovation process probably took almost a year and a half, easily.
And so when did ISIS open up?
In October of 2012.
Okay. And as you're saying it, I can just imagine possibilities. And yet ISIS doesn't look anything like possibilities did, you know, it's a whole new operation. Now it's quite a facility you put together. So talk a little bit about it for people who haven't been there. It's kind of like a upstairs and then there's a downstairs, and describe the place. Yeah.
Well, it was an old theater. So it's kind of a shoebox shaped building. And interestingly enough, you know, there are no parallel walls in the building either, which is great because that's great for acoustics. We gutted the whole thing, and what we did is we put in a lounge that was upstairs, which the lounge was there. It was a bathroom and it was a projection room. So we just converted that into a lounge with a stage, and we've got a small baby grand piano up there that we brought from an Atlanta home. And then we added a balcony in the main hall, and opened up some windows. There were some windows on the sides because it was basically a concrete building for the most part. So right now, what we have is we have a long stage in the green space that's right beside ISIS, between where Biscuit Head and the barbershop is. If you're familiar with those,
I am, sure.
those things. So we have a long stage there, then we have a stage up in our lounge, and then we have our main stage that the lounge holds about 50. The main stage holds about 150 seated, 400 standing. And then the lawn is, you know, depending on whether we put tables out there, which we did during the pandemic. We moved everything outside for about a year.
And how'd that go, being outside?
Good. The atmosphere and ambiance of outside was great. We had actually one of my old band sound systems that I had, we used out there, and it was good. People enjoyed it. They felt comfortable. We still used the 6-foot spacing. The only thing that gave us, you know, issues is that every day you never knew whether it was going to rain or not.
Right.
It basically looked like it was going to rain every day. So. And on those occasions, we did move it inside. You know, we were a restaurant, so we had all seated shows anyway, and we just had table space in 6 feet, so it worked well. In the beginning, there weren't many people willing to come inside, and when they did, it was only in twos.
Right.
Now we're seeing people come out in bigger groups because the fear of, you know, we're getting vaccinated, and the fear of COVID is becoming a little less apparent than it was before.
What was it like, Scott, running a restaurant too? Because given your background, you certainly had an entertainment background. Had you ever been in the food business before?
No.
So how was that, getting into a whole new gig like that?
Well, there are a lot of things to learn about that. I think our challenges were twofold. One, working in an industry that we hadn't worked in before, although prior to us opening that, our children went out and got jobs in restaurants. So they went out to work either in the dish pit or whatever else serving, so that they had some expectations about what was going on. But, you know, business is business. I say that business is business. And, you know, to me, the whole thing wasn't scary. It was like, well, you got finances, you've got overhead, you got fixed overhead, you got food costs and all of these things. The thing that's a little different in the restaurant industry is that the margin is pretty small.
Right.
So if you don't have the right personnel around, or you have a chef that can't keep your food costs in order, well, you have to be well capitalized to make it work for sure.
By the way, you just gave some fantastic advice to any listeners or anybody viewing this show. And I love what you said about your kids getting jobs in the food industry, because they got those jobs knowing that they'd be eventually with ISIS. Was that the intention?
Yes, that was the intention.
Because I used to tell Scott the same thing too. I tell my students, you want to find out about a job, work in it, try it out, see it, learn it. And that's the best way, which segues into kind of an interesting thing about your operation too. It's a family-based operation.
Yes.
Talk about who else is in the business.
Well, right now, my wife and I and my two sons. My oldest son is pretty much the general manager, and his brother helps him out with all the spots that they have to do. My wife pretty much does the financial component and the taxes, which is what she did for the veterinary hospital as well. She kind of maintained that and did inventory. She doesn't do inventory for ISIS, but she does basically the taxes and the bills and tracks the P&L and all of those things. My daughter was here helping us, and she was helping us with the booking and some of the stuff in ISIS as well. She met a man that lives in Denver, and she ended up in Denver now. So we miss her, but she also provided us with a great granddaughter. So we're all good and happy about that. So we had 5 of us here in the original, and now it's just 4 of us running it now. I mean, we have staff that we consider family too, but.
And talk a little bit about the operation, Scott, for the folks who haven't been there and they're missing quite a experience. But ISIS, I think I like ISIS for 2 things. One, talk a little bit about the food, and we'll talk about the entertainment. But if somebody wants to come to ISIS for a meal, they can certainly do so. What kind of food will they experience?
Well, it's kind of fine casual dining. We've got an executive chef, and the menu right now is changing quite a bit. We had to skinny it down during the pandemic, so we cut it down pretty well. One, to make it executable by a smaller number of people, but we try to. I don't have a menu in front of me, but we didn't want to get into doing bar food, because then you become, just a bar with food. So it's basically a fine casual dining, and we offer dinner and a concert as kind of our business model. In the past, we did have general seatings, but as you may know, having been to ISIS, the lounge is pretty much a very intimate seated thing. You have jazz and smaller groups and folk Americana and singer-songwriters, and then downstairs it's still the same type of thing, only usually larger acts or louder acts or a big band like Russ Wilson's orchestra of jazz. What we've done during the pandemic is that we're only doing dinner shows, because we couldn't get that many people in order to sustain a staff. You basically had to eliminate something. So what we eliminated was just the general admission. So it's basically dinner and a concert's what we're doing now.
And one of the things I've always admired, Scott, about your place is you certainly have a wide range of entertainment you provide to people. And talk a little bit about kind of your strategy on that, or what do you look for in providing entertainment to folks in Nashville?
Well, I remember when we got here, somebody asked me what we were going to book, and I said, well, I'm only going to book things that I like, which I think is, that's easy, because I don't have to depend on anybody else. But they kind of laughed and said, well, good luck with that. And but really, honestly, if I had to sum it up, I would say we actually kind of tend a little bit more towards non-commercial music. We do a good bit of bluegrass. We do a good bit of folk. We do a good bit of Celtic music. We do singer-songwriter. Jazz. We do old-time music. So all of those are pretty much, essentially non-commercial music. We do some rock, but not much. We don't do too much funk or no rap or hip hop, although occasionally we've had some that do that, but it's pretty much in the acoustic range for the most part. And I love all of these music. Of course, Celtic and old time and bluegrass are all born out of the same, you know, those genres are pretty much had the same background, all Scotch Irish and, you know, brought to the hills of Western North Carolina. So it's kind of an interesting thing.
One of the fun things I enjoy about what you offer too, Scott, is it's certainly a range which has also helped me grow a little bit, you know, in terms of that almost all the time you'll see different kinds of acts being at your place, which is, I think, fun. It's not going to be the same old all the time. Like you said, you know, if all you want is heavy rock, you're not going to get that, you know, or if all you want is banjo, you'll get banjo, but you'll get some other stuff as well. And I think that's kind of makes it fun. You've also done too, and I've seen a couple of shows at your place and talk about that process as well. You've had some actual theater productions too.
We'd love to have more theater productions. Yeah. Our problem with theater is, and we've done the, now that you've asked me that, I'm going to have a name blank.
The radio play I've seen a couple of times there.
Yes, we do the live at WL.
Right.
At the holiday time period, and I was just trying to think of the production company's name, but basically those are shows that you can do one-off, and you know, we've been asked about it. It's kind of, well, if you do a theater play, usually it's a three-week run, and if it's all successful, it's really good.
Right.
It's not so successful, then you've got 3 weeks worth of loss that is, you know, as a restaurant would be very difficult to recover from. It's a Wonderful Life.
It's wonderful.
And
we'll have the name of the company, Willie Rapoli's company.
Yes.
I just love it. Yeah.
I've forgotten his name, but I'm not the name of the theater company, but that's always a really great show. And he did one more there as well, Headless Horseman. Right. Headless Hissian, I think. I can't remember the name of the play, but I would love to do more than those, but more of those shows, because it's really interesting and it's different than what anybody else is, you know, doing as far as a music venue in town. But you know, it has to be one of those one-off kinds of things where you only do 1 or 2 nights.
In terms of people wanting to perform at ISIS, is there a process, or can somebody just call you up, or what happens if a group wants to come in?
Well, we had a pretty elaborate process prior to COVID, when I had some staff, and you can apply for you know, a booking on our website, and we have a form that they can fill out, and it gives us all the things that we can sit down and look at. And originally what we were doing is they would fill out this Google form, which is wonderful, and it would give us all the information that we needed to take a look at, and we could look at their website, we could look at a live video, we could listen to their music, we could see if they had assets, we could see if they've ever played in Asheville, what their expectations were in terms of people drawing. But basically right now, it's you send a note to, or you fill out the submission form on the website, which is you know, icesasheville.com, and then we review what's on that form, and it gives us enough information to look at. I will say we do a lot of artists that people have not heard of, because there's a lot of really, really great talent up there that just hadn't been commercially produced to become popular, but are every bit as talented as those that you might see that draw really, really big crowds.
And that's, again, I think one of the exciting things about shows at ISIS, you will see some stuff you won't see elsewhere, you know, which is, I think, kind of fun, you know, rather than the same old. When do you do shows? What nights of the week typically?
Well, you know, before COVID, we were open 6 nights a week. We were doing sometimes, the vast majority, we were doing 2 shows a night. Sometimes in the summer when we had the lawn open, we'd be doing 3. So we were doing about 525 shows a year, which is exhausting.
Sounds it.
With COVID, you know, we backed down and we were doing 4 shows, just 1 show a night Thursday through Sunday. And that's what we're doing currently right now, is we're doing 4 shows a week.
Scott, if folks want to find out more information about the shows coming up and about ICE's Music Hall, what's the best bet?
Well, the best bet is to, of course, visit our website at the icesasheville.com, and our Twitter and our Instagram is also ICES Asheville as well. Or the Facebook page. We're pretty active on getting shows out on Facebook. So I like to piddle with videos. So I put out video promotions that, you know, have some of the music on it and the artists that are on there. So you can kind of get a little bit of a taste of the music as opposed to just the name. Because for us, a lot of the names, you know, don't resonate with a lot of people because they're artists that haven't made it to the top of the charts yet.
And let me jump in, Scott. I think we're against the clock. So I'd just like to thank you for being my guest this half hour on the BLAINESWORLD show. And hopefully I'll get to see you soon back at where you belong at the theater. Speak to you soon. Thanks again.
All right, very good. Thank you.